Someone in your life right now may be using psychological tactics against you. Not because they are obviously evil. Not because they announced it. But because these techniques are so deeply embedded in human behavior that most people using them do not even realize they are doing it, and most people experiencing them have no idea it is happening. These 7 techniques are documented by psychologists, studied in universities, and used every day by narcissists, cult leaders, abusive partners, manipulative coworkers, and advertising companies. By the end of this video, you will recognize every single one of them. And once you see them, you will never be able to unsee them. Before we examine the tactics, you need to understand why they work. The human brain is not built for rational evaluation under emotional stress. When we feel threatened, loved, jealous, or afraid, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking, effectively goes offline. The limbic system, which handles emotion and survival, takes over. Skilled manipulators, whether they know the neuroscience or not, instinctively target this vulnerability. They create emotional states that disable your capacity to think clearly, and then they act. Research from the University of California found that people under emotional duress are 3 times more likely to comply with requests they would otherwise refuse. You are not weak if manipulation works on you. You are human. And that is exactly what they are counting on. Tactic 1: Gaslighting. The name comes from a 1944 film in which a husband secretly dims the gas-powered lights in their home, then tells his wife she is imagining the change. His goal: make her believe she is losing her mind so she becomes dependent on him. In real life, gaslighting means systematically making someone doubt their own perception of reality. The manipulator insists that never happened. You are imagining things. You are too sensitive. You have always been like this. Over time, the target stops trusting their own memory and judgment entirely. They begin checking their perception with the manipulator before forming any opinion. This creates total psychological dependency. Gaslighting is documented in abusive relationships, narcissistic family systems, and in corporate environments where managers use it to avoid accountability for failure. The single most powerful counter-tool is documentation. Write things down. Date them. Trust what you recorded before the conversation that told you it never happened. Tactic 2: Love bombing. This is almost always how it begins. You meet someone. Almost immediately, they are overwhelming in their attention, constant messages throughout the day, intense declarations of connection, gifts, compliments that feel almost too perfect. You feel uniquely seen and chosen. What is actually happening is a calculated neurochemical attack. Love bombing floods the target's brain with dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals released in early romantic love, creating a rapid, powerful emotional bond that bypasses normal rational evaluation. Once the bond is established, the manipulator withdraws affection suddenly and without explanation. This is called the devaluation phase. The target, now neurochemically attached and confused by the sudden change, does almost anything to return to that initial feeling of being chosen. This cycle, idealization, devaluation, withdrawal, is the foundational pattern of narcissistic abuse and is present in virtually every documented cult recruitment methodology. Tactic 3: Intermittent reinforcement. This may be the most powerful psychological trap ever documented. In the 1950s, behavioral psychologist B.E.F. Skinner ran a now famous experiment. He found that when rewards were given unpredictably, sometimes after a behavior, sometimes not, subjects became far more obsessed and persistent than when rewards were given consistently. The uncertainty itself became the engine of compulsion. The modern slot machine is engineered entirely around this principle. So, intentionally or not, are many abusive relationships. When kindness and cruelty alternate without a predictable pattern, the nervous system enters a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for signs of reward, unable to disengage. The brain releases dopamine not when the reward arrives, but in anticipation of it. The rare moments of warmth become extraordinarily potent. This is neurologically indistinguishable from addiction. It is not weakness that keeps people in these situations. It is brain chemistry being exploited without mercy. Tactic 4, Triangulation. The manipulator introduces a third-party, real or implied, to create jealousy, competition, and chronic insecurity. They mention casually how attractive an ex still is. They compare your work to a colleague's. They flirt with someone in your presence and then deny it happened when you react. They tell you that their previous partner never complained about this. The purpose is not attraction to the third party, it is destabilization of you. A target who feels replaceable works harder to prove their value, apologizes more quickly, and is far less likely to maintain boundaries. In family systems, triangulation between siblings is a primary tool of narcissistic parents, keeping children competing for approval rather than supporting each other. In workplaces, managers use it to prevent employees from forming coalitions. The antidote is to recognize when a third party is being strategically introduced into a two-person dynamic. Tactic 5, the silent treatment. Also called stonewalling or emotional withholding. The manipulator withdraws all communication, no responses, no acknowledgement, complete emotional disappearance as punishment for something you said or did that threatened their control. The effect on the target is profound and measurable. Neuroscience research at Purdue University found that being socially excluded activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, which processes both physical injury and social rejection, cannot distinguish between being hit and being ignored by someone you love. The target, experiencing what is neurologically equivalent to physical pain, becomes desperate to end it. They apologize for things they did not do. They concede positions they were correct about. They make promises they resent. The silent treatment does not resolve conflict. It trains the target that any challenge to the manipulator's behavior will result in suffering. Tactic 6, DARVO. The acronym was coined by psychologist Jennifer Freyd and stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim and Offender. The sequence is almost always identical. You confront the manipulator about harmful behavior. First, they deny it happened entirely, regardless of evidence. When denial fails, they attack your motives, your mental stability, your credibility, your history. And then, with startling speed, they reposition themselves as the actual victim of the confrontation itself. You tell them they hurt you. Suddenly, you are abusive for bringing it up. You present evidence of a lie. Suddenly, you are paranoid and controlling. DARVO is devastatingly effective because it completely derails the original grievance. The real victim ends up defending themselves from accusations rather than addressing the original harm. It appears in narcissistic personality disorder, in abuser psychology, in corporate misconduct cases, and with remarkable consistency in public figures facing accountability. Tactic 7, Isolation. It is the most dangerous because it disables every other defense you have. A manipulator who has successfully isolated their target has removed the most critical protection humans possess, outside perspective. The process is almost always gradual and almost always framed as care. Your friends are a bad influence. Your family does not appreciate you the way I do. Why would you need anyone else when you have me? Each relationship that disappears narrows the target's world until the manipulator is the only source of information, validation, emotional support, and reality. There is no one left to say, this is not normal. This is not love. This is not what you deserve. Isolation is the operating system of every documented cult. It is the foundation of every case of long-term domestic abuse. And it begins with statements that sound, in the moment, like devotion. Psychologists use the term dark triad to describe three personality types that consistently employ these tactics, not occasionally, but as a fundamental operating mode. The first is narcissistic personality disorder. individuals with an inflated self-image, a profound need for admiration, and a near-complete absence of empathy. They do not experience guilt for harm they cause, they experience inconvenience when harm is discovered. The second is Machiavellianism, a pattern of strategic, calculated manipulation driven purely by self-interest, with no emotional investment in others beyond their utility. The third is psychopathy, characterized by impulsivity, emotional shallowness, and a genuine inability to form the emotional bonds that normally prevent people from harming those close to them. Research published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences found that dark triad traits are significantly overrepresented in positions of organizational power, management, politics, finance, and law. These are not rare individuals hiding in shadows. They are, statistically, more likely than average to be in positions of authority over you. Understanding this is not cynicism. It is accuracy. Knowledge alone is the first layer of defense, and it is powerful. These tactics depend on invisibility. The moment you name what is happening, its grip loosens. But recognition is only the beginning. Maintain relationships outside any single dynamic. Manipulators cannot operate effectively when their target has strong external support networks. Trust documentation over memory. When someone tells you something did not happen, check what you wrote down. Take space before responding to emotional pressure. The urgency a manipulator creates is almost always artificial. Most critically, pay attention to patterns over time rather than individual incidents. Every tactic on this list requires repetition to work. A single incident of coldness is not stonewalling. A single compliment is not love bombing. But a pattern, consistent, predictable, always serving one person's control, is something else entirely. You are allowed to name it. You are allowed to leave. 7 tactics. Each one documented in peer-reviewed research. Each one potentially operating in your life right now, in a relationship, a workplace, a family, or a screen. The defining characteristic of psychological manipulation is that it works best in the dark. The moment you can see it clearly, describe it accurately, and name it out loud, its power over you begins to collapse. This does not mean every difficult person in your life is a predator. Most conflicts are not manipulation, they are ordinary human friction, miscommunication, and unmet needs. But a pattern of these tactics, applied consistently and always in one direction, is something different. It has a name. And the people who study it agree on one thing: the single most protective factor is not intelligence, not strength, not experience. It is awareness. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for a new psychological deep dive every week. Because understanding the darkness around you is not paranoia. It is the most important form of self-defense there is.